All right, everybody, we are back for section 12 of our new criminology course. And in this one, we're going to be talking about integrated theories, where we take two or more theories and kind of shove them together. All right? Now, when you're evaluating theories or developing new theories or refining theories, because all of the theories that I've talked about this entire course are not the same as they were when they were first kind of created. All of them have gone through variations and modifications, some minor, some major, right? But there's three essentially different ways to do this process, right? The first is to look at each theory alone, to kind of test that theory and see how well it predicts criminal behavior and modify that theory and completely ignore all the other theories out there. The second is to take two theories and determine which one does a better job of explaining crime. So it's kind of a competition. You take a big data set and then you have variables for these two different theories and you see which set of variables is better able to predict criminality. The third way is the one we're going to be talking about in this section, and that's integration. To take two or more theories and kind of put them together and say, well, maybe the ideas from this theory and the ideas from this theory can be used to explain crime better than either one of the two individual theories alone, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about in this section. Now, there's lots of different ways to do this, okay? One of them is to do what's called an end-to-end integration, which says that kind of one theory or the variables associated with one theory lead to variables associated with a second theory or even a third and a fourth theory. And it's kind of a causal chain where variation in this causes variation in this, which causes variation in this, which causes crime, right? Another one is side by side. And side by side integration says, look, this theory explains one type of crime or one situation or one kind of paradigm where crime can happen, and this other theory explains this other situation or this other type of crime or this other paradigm of when crime happens. So it's not necessarily one then the other. It's one explaining this subset of crime and one explaining this subset of crime, whether that subset of crime is type of crime or age that crime happens, or violent crime versus property crime versus adolescent status offenses, etc. We can also do kind of a more complete shoving together, right? Which is called an up and down. And there's different ways to do this. There's theoretical reduction, where you subsume one theory into another and say this theory is really just describing the aspects of this other theory in slightly different ways. So we're going to say this is now a part of this bigger one, right? Or we can do a theoretical synthesis where we say these two factors, these two pieces of these two theories are going to be kind of shoved together into this third theory that is really different than either of the two at the beginning, right? So related to that, there's what's called the conceptual integration, right? So part of this up or down process can include things like conceptual integration, where you're saying, look, these two concepts from these two different theories are really just different ways of measuring and looking at and understanding basically the same thing, right? And as an example of that, if we think back to social bonding theory, which we talked about many sections ago, if you look at things like attachment bonds and beliefs, there are some researchers who say, well, that's really just differential association and definitions, right? Those are the same basic concepts in those two separate theories, right? That's conceptual integration, all right? So, you have to be careful, okay? First off, it can be difficult, although not impossible, to combine theories that have different levels of analysis, right? Macro theories and micro theories. If one theory you're trying to integrate is explaining the criminality of individuals, but the other theory is a macro theory attempting to explain the criminality of groups, that can be difficult to combine, right? You also have to remember that every theory has a different set of assumptions, among which is, are people inherently good and need something to drive them into committing crime? Or are people inherently criminal and they need something to restrain them from committing crime? That's one example of an assumption. And if you try to take two different theories that have completely separate basic assumptions and shove them together, you can get what some researchers have called theoretical mush, where it's just kind of, it might sound good when you say it fast, but if you take a closer look at what exactly these concepts are attempting to measure and how they're theorized to work and all those things, it no longer makes sense at all, right? So we have to be careful to make sure that if we're combining two or more theories, if there are contradictory assumptions, we have to resolve those somehow. We have to figure out, which theory's assumption is kind of wrong, and we're no longer going to assume that, and does that completely then destroy our integrated theory? All right? So it's not as easy as just saying, oh, well, this variable from this theory and this variable from this theory, and let's put them together, and boom, we have an even better theory. It gets a lot more complicated than that when you look at levels of analysis and assumptions and different fundamental beliefs behind how and why these theories can predict or are associated with criminal behavior. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a little break. This was a short one, I know, but I'll see you in just a minute.